have covered, feel free to ask that too. We can discuss those questions also since tomorrow is our exam. So in case you don't have any questions, then I'll start teaching. So it is in your interest whether you want this to be today's discussion to be included in tomorrow's quiz or not. But anyway, yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask now. Otherwise, I'll move ahead. Till what portion is there for exam, sir? Thought I posted on the group, but it doesn't look like everybody got the answer. Got that post. It's whatever we cover till today will be there for the syllabus for the exam. Any other questions? Kaushik, would we get questions similar to that in surprise quiz? Not on pointers, not on pointers as such. I mean, that was just to kind of keep you kind of in check about your own understanding of pointers. Pattern might be similar, yeah. But yeah, I might ask you to write the code also, since Moodle allows you to write sufficiently large code. So I might allow you to write some piece of code. There will be some fill in the blanks. There might be multiple choice questions. All of this is possible. Whatever is possible on Moodle, we'll do that. Okay, anybody has any technical questions? Yeah, I think you should not worry about this pattern and all. Just study for, I mean, the exam, right? I mean, whatever material we have covered, just go through that. I think that is what I should say. Don't try to calculate too much about what kind of pattern, what kind of questions will be asked and so on. But anyway, it is just my opinion. Duration is 90 or 120 minutes, Anish is asking. Likely that it will be 90 minutes. So it will be 10 to 11:30. Likely, I haven't finalized the quiz yet, but likely that it will be 90 minutes. By the way, I should also mention that there will be 2 quiz links on Moodle. I'll post this anyway, but don't be surprised to see 2 quiz links. Whatever is the quiz one that you should opt for. Institute and government expects that some of the differently abled students should get additional time, and therefore there will be a different link having the same questions, which will be specifically marked as for differently abled, right, or for extra time or something like that. So those students who have been identified by the institute, those will only get the additional 33% time, which is 120 minutes. Yours will be likely 90 minutes. And yeah, so if you solve it in the proper quiz one, then it will be evaluated. If you solve it in the wrong one, I may not evaluate that, right? So please be careful about that part. And who are the students who are PD students? Well, that is given by the institute, and I have separately mailed those students. If you have not received the email, that means that you should write it in the regular quiz link. Okay. Any other technical questions? All right. So if there are no further technical, okay, there is. If time complexity is asked, we'll answer for O, not others, right? Yeah, if time complexity is asked, then you should write in order O notation. Yes, correct. Will there be any STL implementations? If we have covered some STL, for example, in stack, then there will be. If we have not covered, for example, Q, then it will not be. Again, whatever we have covered in the class, whatever codes we have looked at and made available on the course webpage, all of those are going to be in the syllabus. And I'm sure if you have done the assignment well, most of you will not face any trouble. But yeah, there is some theoretical part which we need to go through, which you should definitely try out. Okay, so there are no further questions, so I'll move ahead. Some question. In STL for stack vector int is valid. Stack of vector of int, that should be valid. So can we, I was getting it was not defined. Stack of vector of int, it should be okay is what I feel. I don't know why it was not getting defined. So not defined meaning what was the exact error? Was it like uh, expecting std colon or was it saying something else? So all these aggregates, yeah, go
Sir,
ahead.
I was defining some sorting methods also in between, but it was saying not defined something for one of the methods. I mean, for yeah.
Yeah, it's a little strange if it is giving error for this. Usually all these aggregates can be combined in arbitrary ways. And therefore you should have should be possible to have stack of vector of it.
Oh, okay, sir. Sir, what about unordered set of vector of int? That is also possible.
Unordered set of vector of it. Yes, that should also be possible. Unordered set. Uh, yeah, it should also be possible. We can have vector of int as the each element of an unordered or even ordered set. That should be okay. The
Okay,
only small, yeah, only small issue is that we might have to define a comparator operator if it is ordered set. Uh, but for unordered set, that should also be not required. So it should be possible, is what I think. Sometimes it creates a problem. I mean, compilation wise, it creates a problem when you have this vector of int greater than and followed by the final greater than. That might cause issue because while parsing it considers it to be a right shift operator. So you might have to give a space. So vector of int greater than space greater than, that might be the only thing that might be required, but otherwise it should be possible.
okay, sir. Okay, I'll try.
Yeah. Then Pavan is asking, I think it should be defined like this: stack of int comma vector of. Oh, why is that? I didn't understand why it should be a int comma vector of int. I thought it takes only one argument, right? So why two arguments? I didn't understand. Okay, Shania is asking, how do we transfer the contents of one stack to another, maintaining the order? Okay, so that's an interesting question. If you want to replicate a stack, how will you transfer? Let's say S1 to S2 you want to transfer. How will you do that? Any suggestions? This is a good question. Anybody wants to suggest? Will you use a third stack? Sure. So that seems to be one way that you can use a third stack, and that will probably help you. Another way is if you have access to a queue, then you can pop the elements from the. Well, will that help? So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No, that will not. You will need a stack, right? Not the queue as such. Yeah, you are right. Um, or alternatively, if you have other linked list or some other data structure, that could be another way in which that can be done. Yeah, so Shreyas has written that, Kaushik has written that, use an intermediate stack. Anish says, Madhur says, first transfer to third stack. Aniruddha says, with order one space for order and we can use array. Shania is asking, with only two stacks. Yeah, at least I don't know the two stack implementation. If anybody knows, feel free to suggest. Abhishek is asking, stack of vector of int, this is valid, we can define like this. Okay, that sounds good. Thanks for confirming. How do you maintain the order? Yeah, I don't have a solution for this question, Shania. Uh, I don't know if it has a good solution or if it has any trick to it. But yeah, if somebody knows, please feel free to suggest. Okay, Kashi Bhatla is saying, yeah, S1 equal to S2 will work. Sure, agree. Yeah, this, if you are worried only about the uh, implementation of how to convert this, then yes, this STL allows equal to operator to be overloaded for stacks. So you can do this way, sure. Clone a stack without extra. Could you explain this? I found it here. Okay, I'll have to go through this. Raude Baba, Raude. I'll have to go through this link later. I'll probably note it down, but I'll go through it only later. Any other concerns? All right. So we'll move to our. So this is what we discussed yesterday. Post. There is a question.
Yeah, I put it in chat. Like, what's the difference between vector int? Sorry, stack int and stack vector int?
What is the difference you are asking? Oh, I see. Anish has asked this question. Oh, okay. So stack of integers meaning that each element in the stack is going to be just one integer. Whereas stack of vector of integers meaning each element in the stack is going to be a complete vector of integers. Another element in the stack will be another vector and so on. Right? So think about it, stack of, let's say, roll numbers, if I say, right? So which could be represented as, let's say, suppose integers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then that becomes stack of integers. But if you have a stack of different classes, right? So let's say there is a one class for PDS, another for some other course, another for something. Then there will be a vector of integers where each vector constitutes of multiple roll numbers, let's say, or integers. So that becomes stack of vector of integers.
So the width of the stack, would it be like different, or will they be like pointers to each of these? As in, like, since the size of each element in the stack, if it's integer, it would be like 4 bytes, but if it's a vector, we don't know the size. So would it just point to the first element of the vector?
That's a good question. So see, vector of integer or stack, all of these are different classes, and classes have to have a fixed size. Classes meaning these are going to be structures. So internally the implementation will have a pointer which will be pointing to some memory location and so on. And that memory location, whatever pointer is pointing to, that will not be considered in the size of this particular structure. So this class is going to have fixed size. Internally it will have pointers which will be pointing to different elements. That is going to be arbitrary. So in case of stack of vector of int, the vector of int class has a fixed size. Within that it will have pointers. So that pointer size will be included, but whatever memory points to, that will not be. In fact, you can try it out. So you can define a stack of vector int and do a size of on the each element of this stack. Right? So you just pop the element and do a size of. You will see that it should be the same size. Otherwise, it becomes difficult for the stack to be maintained. Okay. Any other concerns? Can you explain star star versus star, where star star is used instead of star? Okay, so this is, I mean, if you have double pointer, that should be pointing to a single pointer, like int star star should be pointing to int star, right? So if I have int x star px and star star ppx, right? So if this is my declaration of variables, then px equal to ampersand of x is a valid statement. Ppx equal to ampersand of px is a valid statement. ppx equal to ampersand of x should result in warning or error. And if you want to make that work, you will have to typecast it with int star star of ampersand of x. This should be okay. But you have to be careful. So, well, at every dereference level, the higher dereference level can point to the lower immediately lower dereference level. That is what it means. And therefore, our arrays are essentially of the single dereferences, right? So int star is what we call as, it could be either a single element or multiple elements. So the array could be considered as int star or type star. And then if you have an array of arrays, which means a matrix, or an array of whatever arrays that we have discussed once, then that becomes int star star. Ampersand essentially is just the address of the variable that appears on the right hand side. So whenever we do an address, we are increasing the dereference level in some sense, right? So when you say that x is of type int, ampersand of x will be of type int star. And so that is increasing the dereference level. So I can do int y equal to x, but I should not do px equal to x, right? So px is on the left hand side, which is of type int star, which is a pointer. And therefore, to match that, I need to do ampersand of x. That doesn't mean that int star star ppx equal to ampersand x you can do. It doesn't make sense. But yeah, you can do ampersand of px. Ampersand is just taking the address of that variable, whereas when we use x, we usually use the value of that variable. Madhur is asking ppx equal to int star star ampersand of x. Okay, what does this do? Okay, so ppx is just a memory location. I mean, some variable which is holding some value. Just that we are saying that it is going to be of type int star star. Now that value could be anything. I can as well push 0 into that value or 5 into that value, into that memory location, right? Because as far as hardware memory is concerned, that is your RAM, it does not distinguish between types. For it, it's just a bunch of memory locations, bunch of bytes, bunch of words. It's the type is being enforced by the compiler, so to say, or the language. Right? So when we say that I have a struct student, right? Student is not known to the hardware. Right? It's just our interpretation of what that student is. It's just a bunch of bytes for the hardware. How you operate on them is decided by the programming language support and the user, how the user is using it. So in this case, ampersand of x is going to be an address. That address we are storing inside the ppx. So what C allows is that you can typecast with arbitrary types and you can store the value. For example, in fact, you can as well do something like this: ppx equal to int star of x. This should also be possible, where x is might be having some value like garbage value 0, 5, 23, whatever. And ppx can actually contain that address. But it should be a valid program, because later you are going to do something like this: ppx or star ppx. One of these two expressions you are going to use. This should be valid. Or if it is storing a valid address like ampersand of x, then star ppx makes sense. But if it is using some value 5 or 3 or something like that, then star ppx does not make sense. So when you are doing typecasting, the language is providing you an opportunity to do arbitrary things, but then it becomes onus on you to do it in a proper way. That star ppx should make sense. The program should actually be correct. So that can be very useful in some embedded systems, or if you are doing some systems programming, etc. Or even using malloc, for example, we might want to typecast, etc. But other than that, you should stick to the types as much as possible. That's a good programming practice. In fact, many of the newer languages will not allow you to do such a typecasting. Anish, can we change int star pointer address to direct to an int star star pointers address, yes, you can do arbitrary things there. Just that pointer will continue to, I mean, the pointer contains some value. That value, we are treating it as an address. Now, that address could be address of int variable, that could be address of an int stars variable. So depending upon that, we can change it. For example, let's do it this way: int star px equal to ampersand of qx, right? Where qx is also a pointer to ampersand of q, and int q equal to 5. Right. So what I have is that there is int q equal to 5. Int star qx is pointing to ampersand of q, and then int star px with a typecast. I haven't shown the typecast. So px and qx are of the same type. So therefore, to do ampersand of qx, I actually need int star star px. But you can do it with typecasting. I haven't shown that. Now, if I do printf %d star star px, that will print the value of 5. Again, I'll have to typecast here most probably, because px is of type star and I should not do star star 2 times, but it should be possible, and that is going to be allowed with typecasting. So that way, essentially, px is int star, but you can convert it into int stars. I mean, that int star star etc. is at the language level. You just typecast it and you can convert it to any type. Does that seem reasonable, Anish? Any other concerns, questions? Murari is asking, note star ampersand of Peter. Is this right way to pass pointer by reference? Yes, that is correct. Basu is asking, is typecasting allowed in C or only in C++? Both in C and C++. So those of you, I mean, I just expand on Murari's question. Those of you who, I mean, if we have programmed in C, we'll see that if I have to write a function where head changes, and if I'm passing head, so let's say that void fun and node star head, right? And then there is some body of the function, right? This is how I write. Always I have to be careful that if head is null, then head is not going to get changed. If I have to pass head, then I have to do it something like this: void fun node star star head ptr. And internally, I'll have to, inside that function, I'll have to access it as star head ptr, so that head will change. Right? So that is one way in which we'll do in C. Alternatively, you can keep head global. Right? So that is another way. In C++, you can do something like what Murari said, where you can say node star of ampersand of head, and then access head directly. Yeah, sorry, I lost connection again. Yeah, so last I mentioned was this head can be passed with reference, and then whatever you do, that is possible to be changed. I mean, whatever you do with the head, if you update head inside the function, then that is possible to be reflected in the column. And therefore, the swap function that we usually give example of, right? So when I do void swap int x int y, and I do the swap inside the function, then whatever arguments I passed, for example, swap a comma b, if this is how I call the function, then a and b do not change, right, in the caller, whereas those x and y actually get changed inside the called function. But with C++, otherwise you will have to use pointers, right? So you have to pass ampersand a, ampersand b. But with C++ pass by reference, you can do something like, and then you just use x and y normally, and then that will get reflected in the swapping of a and b in the caller. So copy of variable is created in this case, yes. In case of non-reference type, that is passed by value, a copy gets created. In case of pass by reference, it's the address which gets copied. Similar to pointers, the underlying implementation is very similar to pointers, but it becomes easier for you to program at the language level, at the programming language level, because you will be using x and y inside this swap function rather than star x and star y, which is what will be required inside C. Pavan is asking, so here we still call swap AB or swap ampersand. In pass by reference, you can do swap AB. That is the advantage. You don't have to pass with address. Although internal implementation takes care of that. But yes, you can just pass swap AB and it will get swapped. That's the power of pass by reference. Okay, any other questions? I'll also suggest that, I mean, some of these questions are coming one day before the exam, but I strongly recommend that whenever you get these questions, I mean, some of you do ask it and I'm happy about it, even if these are not directly related to what we are studying, let's say in the context of data structures or algorithms, it is all right to ask these questions. Right? So feel free to ask whenever it comes to your mind. Don't worry about the rest of the class that they might be ahead of you or they might be knowing and my question is silly and all that. You are learning, we are all learning. Okay, Mayank is asking, what is malloc? Malloc is a way to allocate memory. Now, whenever I declare a variable int x, it allocates some 4 bytes or 8 bytes for that variable x, but that gets allocated on the stack if I'm declaring that variable inside the function. Now, what happens is whenever that function ends, that stack unwinds. That is, the stack is no longer in use, and therefore the variables which were declared locally inside the function, those are not going to be available in the caller. So one way to make those changes visible to the caller is use global variables. So declare some variable as global and then allocate, that memory gets allocated at the start of the program, and that memory is going to be accessible all throughout the all the functions inside the program. So that is one way. But then using too many globals is also not a good idea. I mean, it's not a good programming practice. Especially for large software, it becomes a little unmanageable because the global scope in C is global and can be reflected across, let's say, different teams are working on the same software and you define a variable of type int, let's say int I, and some other person in another team has also created a variable of type I, type integer as I, or maybe another type also. And that will conflict when you merge the two codes together into the same a.out or a.exe. Therefore, sometimes it is useful to have a localized structure where you are allocating memory using some sort of a different mechanism such that the memory is still visible across multiple functions, right? And you should be able to pass it. And that is where malloc comes into picture, where you can allocate memory using this function. It comes from the same RAM, but it's a different part of the RAM called as heap. And heap is managed a little differently than the stack. Stack grows only in one direction, right, as we know. But heap can be arbitrary structures within that heap area can get allocated, right, depending upon how much memory you ask for. Now, that is one way. The other reason why malloc is useful is that you might not know a priori how many elements I want to declare. Right? That size of the problem is coming as an input, the number of particles in your simulation, or the number of points in your machine learning training algorithm. These points might be coming at runtime. So you can't declare that array globally or otherwise, and therefore you require a dynamic memory allocation. So that is also one reason why malloc gets used, where you can specify an arbitrary number of elements. So it allocates memory, gives it to you, and then that pointer you can pass around across different functions, and that memory is available until you explicitly free it. So that becomes like a global scope for that variable. Is new in CPP same as malloc? Almost the same as malloc. It's a little superset of malloc, I will say, because it also calls the constructor for that type. Right? So whatever you can do with malloc, you can do with new. In addition, the constructor will get called. If you just do a malloc, that will also allocate memory, but it will not call the constructor. Kaushik is asking, when we use new in linked list, it is similar to what malloc does. In case of linked list, I think we had some constructor where we were setting the head pointer to null. So if you don't want to use constructor, well and good, that is not a problem. Then malloc and new are going to be similar. Then you will have to use some initializer function to initialize the head. That is also okay. Sai Charan says, do primitive data types also have constructors and destructors like classes and structures? No, they don't have. Only for the user-defined types, we have constructors and destructors. Sweetie is asking, if star px equal to x, it might give some garbage value, not expected value in the programmer. So if px is not pointing to a valid memory location originally, then star px equal to x will cause some trouble, because px is a variable, right? It's a pointer, but it's a variable. And now it will have some memory address in which you will have some bit pattern stored, right? And if it is 0, you will get null pointer exception when you try to dereference it. But if it is a garbage value inside that px, then it will be treated like an address, and the machine will try to go to that address and access it. If it is outside your process address space, then you are lucky, you will get a seg fault. If you are unlucky, it will point to something which is valid inside your process address space, and it will write the value of x in that memory location. And that can cause trouble.
Sir, won't star px equal to x assign the value of x in P?
Yes. So the valid way of doing this is like this. So if you want to move the value of x to y, and y's address is taken inside px, then you can do star px equal to x. That means that x's value is going to get stored in wherever px is pointing to. Px is pointing to y, and therefore this statement is similar to y equal to x. And this statement, some students do commit this mistake. This statement is not same as px equal to ampersand of x. These two are separate statements. Star px equal to x is different from px equal to ampersand of x. Right? Px equal to ampersand of x just stores the value address of x as the value inside px. So now px starts pointing to x with px equal to ampersand of x. Whereas here, the value inside x is getting stored to where px is already pointing to. Okay. Any other concerns, questions? All right. So I'm thankful to you that you guys asked these questions. Okay, there is some more question. In star px equal to x, is this valid? No, because px is pointing to garbage. So it's like saying that int x and printf %dx. Int x and printf %dx. Is this valid or not? Now, I mean, this is valid. I mean, you can write a program like this, but Semantically, it does not make any sense. So in a similar manner, in fact, in this case, as I was explaining, if px is actually pointing to 0, then you are lucky. Or if it is pointing to some address space outside as a garbage value, outside your address space, you are lucky and you will get a seg fault. If it is pointing to something in your program, then it can cause some real trouble. So this is actually a wrong program, unless you want to test actually how it happens and how the error comes.
Sir, even if it's pointing at some random memory location, at that location you're storing the value of x, right? Why is
Yes,
that an issue?
because you don't know where it is pointing to.
You don't
Semantically,
need to know it, right? Like, you just want to access the value of x.
no. See, your storage px is pointing to some random memory location. Px can actually have some value which might actually be referring to another variable in your program, right? And that variable you don't want to change. So it might end up overwriting some value if it is in your address space. Another is that it might be pointing to something outside address space that you don't know, you can't predict. So different executions of this program might actually give different behaviors also.
Outside address space as in?
So each process, when it runs, there are multiple processes running in the CPU, right, at any point in time. So it's possible that in case of Linux and some of the newer versions of Windows, there is protection against one process from the other, right? So one process should not be writing to the memory of some other process. Let's say there is Firefox running, and then there is this PowerPoint also running. Now Firefox, whenever it is writing to some memory location, it should not affect PowerPoint and vice versa. So if it is pointing to some location outside the address space of a particular process, then you get a seg fault. Right? So that protects other processes if one process is faulty.
So now if I first assign int star px equal to null, and then I do star px equal to x, now that's valid.
That becomes a null pointer exception. This is precisely what we discussed, that whenever there is a dereference, you should check that the pointer is non-null. There is no reason why you should want to do a null pointer dereference unless you want to actually check what happens when you do a null pointer dereference.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go to the next question. Namisha is asking, this is a logic question. I'm trying to do this in the lowest order possible. How to return the number of set of numbers which sums up to a particular number. Like if we have the array 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, and if the given number is 6, it should return 3, because 1 plus 2 plus 3, 3 plus 3, and 5 plus 1. Oh my God. I see. So this actually is a problem which is called as NPhard problem. It is a subset sum problem. And in general, this is NPhard problem. What does NPhard mean? That means that nobody knows how to solve this in polynomial time. So there is an exponential algorithm which you can think about all possible combinations, etc., right? 2 to the power n combinations. And those will give you the answer. So only that algorithm is known. But nobody knows how to solve this in polynomial time, right? So having said that, there are some things in a limited way that you can do. For example, you can have this array as sorted, and then you can go from left to right and right to left and try to solve, try to come up with pairs, and then try to come up with triplets and so on. So all of this is possible, but in general, the problem is not polynomial time solvable. Murari is asking, seg fault is given because our particular program cannot access the data. Yes, our program cannot access the data from the other program. Right? Anything which is beyond, yeah.
You are giving example of that Chrome accessing different data.
Right. Shania is asking, instead of void func node star head, can we do node star func node star head and return head? Yes, that is possible. That is possible. Would the changes in this copy of head reflect outside then? After you do a return, yes, that is correct. So you can assign. So again, you are assigning the new value of head after the return, right? After the function returns. Yes, so this is a valid way of assigning the value. That is correct. But you won't be able to do it for swap, for example. For head, it is okay. For example, we cannot return two values. That is the reason. And well, that is also possible. You can put them into a structure and return the structure. That is also possible. Sai Chan is asking, in star px equal to null, star px equal to x. No, it is not valid. Aniruddha says, Naimisha, if repetition is allowed, won't 1 plus 1 plus also work? Yes, it will. Okay. Much more number 3 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. Okay, I think there are nice answers to Naimisha's questions. Anish is asking, if we have node star px equal to null, now to assign a node to px, we have to first do new node or malloc. Yes, these two are two valid ways in which this can be done. The third way is, what is the third way? Anyone? Okay, the third way is this. Yes, okay. Mayank has given Abhishek, okay, copy from another node, although I didn't think about that. Yes, I can say px equal to ampersand. It's correct. So these are other ways in which that can be done. So you have essentially node n1, and then you say px equal to ampersand of n1. That is another way in which you can access, or if even other that I didn't think about, the fourth way could be that you have another pointer which is actually pointing to a valid node that can be assigned to this px. Correct. Segmentation fault is essentially that you are accessing some memory outside the region, that is allocated to you, right? So, okay, since this question has come up, I'll just briefly explain. So there are different segments of a program. When your binary a.out or a.exe is on the disk, right? That needs to run, so it has to be brought into memory, right? Your RAM. That RAM is going to be divided there, so it's going to be allocated to your process a.out in part of different segments. There is going to be some code segment, data segment, text segment, etc. The code segment is going to have your executable instructions, and those are usually not writable because you don't change the instructions while the binary is running, typically. And then the data section is the one which is read-write. So anything which happens beyond the data segment, you are not allowed to write. Even you cannot write to the code segment of your own process, because that is a read-only segment. And therefore, anything which goes beyond the data segment is going beyond the segment, and therefore it is called a segmentation fault. Core dumped. Okay, Shania is asking, what is core dumped? The executable that is lying in the program, in the memory, is called as the core of the program. The executable, all of this is called as the core, which contains both the code as well as the data, right? So all of that is there inside the memory. Now, to debug, something problematic happened, segmentation fault happened, but somebody wants to now debug. So what the hardware does is that it takes this core and dumps it to a file. Dumps it to the file on disk. So all of this memory, RAM, for that process which executed the segmentation fault is dumped to a file. So this core is dumped to the file, and therefore this is called as core dump. In fact, after the core dump, you will see that there is a file that is newly created in your most probably home directory or the same directory where a.out was executed from. That core you can actually debug using applications like CUDA GDB to find out where the error occurred. That is called core dump. Mayank is asking, instead of using node star ptr equal to head, can we do pointer manipulation with node ptr equal to head, where the head is another node, not pointer of a node? Yes, that is possible, but head is going, if head is a node and ptr is again a node, these are going to be two different copies now, right? So then it's like, think about it as int x and int y, and I'm doing y equal to x. Right? Now when I manipulate y, x is intact. When I'm manipulating x, y is intact. So similarly, when you modify head, PTR is not going to change. When you modify PTR, head is not going to change. If that is okay with you, then this is okay. Any other concerns? How can we name a node as head? You you can. And the way Mayank said, node head. That's it. That is how you can name a node as head. You don't want to call it node star, right? So you just do node head and you use it. And then when you want to pass it as a parameter, you pass as ampersand of head, so that it becomes node star in the caller, in the called function. But you have to be a little careful about that part, because node, if you pass, then it is going to be passed by value and then it will not get reflected in the caller. You have to pass it as ampersand of head. Okay. Oh man, we are already we are already end of. Okay, so you guys have succeeded in not adding this material to your quiz, right? So, but then this will get added to your quiz too. So you have only postponed the problem. You have not solved it. Okay. And there is asking, while working on the assignment, when I ran my code with various cases, in one instance while running I got sec fault. While running with some input, same input again, it runs. Why does this happen? Yeah, so this is where the invalid memory location comes into picture. Like we said that int star px and star px equal to 2. Right? If this is the statement that I have, px is going to contain some garbage value when it gets declared. Now this garbage value will change as you run the program multiple times. So in one case, star px actually pointed to a valid memory location and therefore no sec fault occurred. And star px in some other instance was actually pointing to something else, because the address, the bit pattern inside px was pointing to some other address outside the segment, and therefore it gave a sec fault. So that's why I keep saying that if you are lucky, you will get a sec fault. If you are not lucky, you will not get a sec fault and something wrong will happen. But if there is a sec fault which is occurring, let's say you run it 100 times and one time the sec fault is occurring, that means there is a bug. That means there is a bug. You should be careful. And many times, so I would recommend those of you who are familiar with Linux environment, use a debugger if there is a sec fault. It can be very useful. So you have to compile your program as gcc minus g file.cpp or g++ minus g file.cpp, so that the symbols get included. If you are using Visual Studio in Microsoft environment, then the debugger is anyway embedded inside the Visual Studio, so that also you can use. In fact, on Linux also now there is Visual Studio, so you can VS Code or something that you can use for debugging purposes. It can actually point you to the error very quickly. When I tried to debug, nothing happened. It took a long time, but no output. That seems a little odd. The debugger does make the output slow. I mean, the execution slow, because it needs to execute it now instruction by instruction. But yes, it is. It can take time, and as you said, if the input is large, then it will definitely take a longer time. So the slowdown can be anywhere between 2x to 10x. Right? So if it was taking 1 second, it will now take maybe 2 seconds or 10 seconds. So it can have that much effect. But yeah, it should. If the error occurs during that time, during that execution, maybe what happened is during the debugging session, again it was it didn't encounter a segmentation fault. It was a valid address. That could be one reason. But yeah, I recommend running it through the GD. Yeah, it will get a little slow, so you'll have to be careful. Okay, so we will not worry about prefix evaluation today, right? So if there are any questions, I'm going to stay back. But if those of you who have classes, feel free to go ahead.
Sir, in my assignment, I'm facing one issue. Like for for one case, the same program is not making bonds between the pointers basically. Like it's showing in the local function, but it's not making the global thing. But for the other test cases, it's working. So what could be the possible reason for this?
The only thing I see is that there is some change happening locally inside the function, but it is not getting reflected inside the global.
Yes, sir. But it is for just one test case, not for the others.
Yeah, no. So depending upon the test case, maybe that particular error is not getting encountered. But if one test case is giving a problem, that means there is some part which is unhandled in the program. So that you can sense as I mean, your test cases might pass, but that doesn't mean that your program is correct. Right? So testing in general is used to identify bugs. It should not be used for saying that my program is bug free. So in this case also, if once in a while, if it is happening that there is some problem, that means that there is a problem in the code. It's just that the test cases are not rich enough to identify that all the time. Yeah, I think this particular seems to be some local versus global pointer manipulation, which might not be getting reflected. But yeah, if you have succeeded in getting all the test cases pass, then you will get marks. That is not a problem. But there must be some lurking bug somewhere.
No, sir, my test cases didn't pass. So like I tried a lot, and also my friends also try to debug that, but my friend says the code is working fine in like normal thing. But the same thing, that one test case is not occurring. Like I figure out the test case, but I don't know how to like debug it. Try to debug to that, but it's working locally, but not showing in the group.
Anyway, we are going to make all the test cases public after in a few days. So I strongly recommend that you try to run your programs on those and figure out if there is a problem, if there is some case which is handled. And if there is a problem with our test case itself, then you can also point that to us so that we'll correct it. Okay, Anish is asking for the quiz, if we type the code with wrong syntax but right logic, will it be accepted? So I'll not worry about semicolons and all. But if it is something dangerous, then you'll lose marks. But if it is, I'll not worry too much about the syntax as such. Don't worry. So node star head versus node head will cut marks. If you miss out on a parenthesis, etc., that's not a problem.
Sir, one basic question. When we are discussing about a new node star, with this you constructor, if it is defined as a class, but if it's defined as a struct, let's say, even then constructor will be called.
Yeah, in C++, struct and class both are synonymous, except struct by default is public variables, class by default are private variables. So it will work with struct also.
Okay.
Okay.
Sir,
So if there are, yeah.
sir, so tomorrow, like the programming questions, like is it like you are going to run our programs and see if the output is correct, or
No, I don't think so. I don't think
you'll give us marks for the logic? And
yeah, mostly logic, unless you have, as I was saying, node star versus node is a serious mistake. But if you miss out on semicolons, etc., that is not a problem.
okay.
All right. So we'll stop here and see you tomorrow. Enjoy. Sure. Welcome.